Zanele was the kind of girl who turned heads wherever she went. Her eyes held a quiet fire, and her smile masked the weight of dreams too big for the small, dusty town of Mbale, where she grew up. Her family lived in a run-down clay house, surviving on her mother's vegetable stall and the little she made braiding hair at the market. Every night, she would lie on her thin mattress and imagine a different life, one with silk sheets, grand halls, and laughter that didn't come from struggle. Deep down, Zanele knew she wasn't meant for Mbale. She believed beauty and ambition were her ticket out. So when she overheard tourists at a local guest house talking about an upcoming charity gala in Accra, her heart raced. It was her chance. She used borrowed money to travel, rented a cheap room, and managed to sneak into the event in a second-hand gown. There, she transformed. Zanele became the daughter of a wealthy cocoa exporter from Kumasi. Her accent changed, her story polished. No one doubted her, not with that confidence. At the gala, she caught the eye of Kojo Ofori, the heir to the prestigious Ofori shipping empire. He was drawn to her grace, her poise, her mysterious background. She spoke like royalty, laughed like elegance, and moved like someone born into power, and she let him believe every word. To Zanele, it wasn't a lie. It was survival. It was her one chance to rewrite her destiny. She thought love would protect her secret, but every fairy tale has its shadows, and she had no idea that Kojo's mother, Madame Ife Ofori, was already watching her with cold, calculating eyes, sensing that the girl who appeared too perfect might be hiding something far from royal. Zanele knew that just looking the part wasn't enough. If she wanted to truly fit into Kojo Ofori's world, the world of silk gowns, private yachts, and weekend getaways to Dubai, she had to become someone else entirely. So she erased every trace of Mbale from her life. She burned old photos, changed her accent, and deleted her social media accounts. She created a new identity from scratch, telling everyone she was Zanele Adebo, the only daughter of a wealthy cocoa exporter from Kumasi. It wasn't just words. She made it real. She paid a struggling graphic designer to forge high-end documents, fake school certificates from international academies, photoshopped images of her in luxury homes, and even business cards that looked too expensive to question. But the biggest lie was yet to come. Zanele found an older woman in Accra, a cleaner named Kosi, who was desperate for money. She offered her a large sum to pretend to be her mother. They rehearsed their backstory for hours, how Mr. Adebo had passed away in a helicopter crash, how Zanele grew up between Ghana and Europe, how Kosi had retired early to enjoy her late husband's fortune. When Kojo came to visit, Kosi played the role perfectly, elegant scarf, pearls, and all. She even made jollof rice and told fake childhood stories, laughing like she believed every word. Everyone bought the lie, especially Kojo. He was impressed by her background, her supposed upbringing, and how humble she remained despite her family's wealth. Zanele smiled through it all, heart pounding. She had created the perfect illusion, but behind the glamour and smooth lies, the truth waited silently, like a crack in glass, just one touch away from shattering everything she had built. The charity gala in Accra was everything Zanele had dreamed of: golden chandeliers, violins playing softly in the background, and people dressed in clothes worth more than her mother's entire stall. She walked in like she belonged, her second-hand gown hugging her just right, her head held high, her smile controlled but warm. She knew eyes were on her, and that's exactly what she wanted. But it was Kojo Ofori's gaze that lingered the longest. Kojo, the only son of the powerful Ofori family, wasn't used to being impressed, but something about Zanele pulled him in. She wasn't loud like the other socialites, and she didn't try to show off. Instead, she carried herself with quiet confidence, like someone who had grown up around wealth but wasn't consumed by it. When she spoke, her voice was smooth, her words carefully chosen. She told him stories of her childhood in Paris and holidays in Cape Town, sprinkling in just enough detail to sound believable. Kojo was hooked. They danced under the soft lights, and Zanele laughed at just the right moments. She asked about his dreams, his favorite books, and the things that made him feel alive, things most people ignored. She listened closely, touched his arm lightly, and made him feel like the only man in the room. By the end of the night, Kojo didn't want to let her go. And Zanele? She smiled to herself, knowing she had done it. She had captured the heart of Ghana's most eligible bachelor. What she didn't know was that her biggest challenge wasn't falling in love. It was keeping up the lie that had made him fall for her in the first place. And Kojo's mother, watching from across the room, already had questions. Madame Efe Ofori was not a woman easily fooled. As the wife of the late Chief Ofori and guardian of the family legacy, she had seen many women try to get close to her son, but none had lasted. She believed in tradition, class, and most of all, truth. So when Kojo brought Zanele home and introduced her as the daughter of a wealthy cocoa magnate, Madame Efe smiled politely, but something didn't sit right. She watched closely as Zanele spoke, too carefully, too smoothly, like someone reciting lines from a play. Her eyes never truly settled, and her stories, while perfect on the surface, lacked the small details only someone born into that life would know. Madame Efe began to test her in quiet ways. She asked Zanele about people she claimed to know from Kumasi, about schools she said she attended, and even about the brands of luxury chocolates her family business was supposedly tied to. Zanele answered each question with a nervous charm, but the older woman noticed her hesitation, the slight pause before speaking, the way her eyes flickered down before answering. It was small, but Madame Efe had learned that deception often lived in the small things. She mentioned old business friends from the cocoa industry, asking if Zanele's father had ever worked with them. Zanele smiled, pretending to know, but the names meant nothing to her. Later, Madame Efe checked. None of them had ever heard of a Mr. Adebo. That's when her suspicions grew stronger. She didn't shout or accuse. Not yet. She simply tightened her smile and watched more closely. In her heart, she knew Zanele was hiding something, and if this girl thought she could fool the Ofori family, she was about to learn that Madame Efe did not let lies live for long. The engagement party was like something out of a dream. Held at one of Accra's most luxurious hotels, the hall glittered with gold and white, draped in silk, and flowers flown in from Nairobi. Everyone who was anyone in Ghanaian society was there to celebrate the union of Kojo Ofori and the mysterious, elegant Zanele. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and guests whispered about how perfect she looked. Zanele floated through the room like a queen, her smile wide, her laugh effortless. She had fooled them all, or so she thought. But just as the speeches were about to begin, the doors opened, and in walked Akinyi, Zanele's childhood friend from Mbale. Dressed simply, her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Zanele, and in that moment, everything stopped. Zanele's smile faltered, her heart dropped. She hadn't seen Akinyi in years, not since they were struggling to share school uniforms and sneaking mangoes from street stalls. Akinyi's eyes widened as she took in the sight. Zanele in diamonds, standing next to Kojo, surrounded by people who believed she was rich and powerful. She took a step forward, confused but curious. Zanele panicked. She rushed over, tried to block her, whispering harshly through clenched teeth, begging her not to say a word, but it was too late. Kojo noticed, Madame Efe noticed, and so did everyone else around them. Zanele? Akinyi said softly. It's me, Akinyi, from Mbale. Gasps echoed, heads turned. Zanele stood frozen, her perfectly built world cracking like glass under pressure. The lie she had protected with all her heart was now hanging by a thread, and the one person who knew the truth had just walked into her fantasy with nothing but honesty in her eyes. After the awkward moment with Akinyi at the engagement party, Madame Efe's quiet suspicions turned into a storm she could no longer ignore. Zanele had brushed it off, claiming Akinyi was confused and hadn't seen her in years. But Madame Efe had seen the fear in her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly, the forced laugh that came too quickly. Something wasn't right, and now she was determined to find out what it was. Without telling Kojo, she called in an old friend, a private investigator, known for handling delicate matters for Ghana's elite. His name was Badu, and he never missed a detail. Badu took Zanele's documents, her supposed school records and background information, and began to dig. Within days, the trail led him straight to Mbale, a small town in Uganda that held the truth Zanele tried so hard to erase. There Badu found the real story. Zanele wasn't the daughter of any cocoa magnate. She was the child of Mama Jalia, a market vendor who sold vegetables under a broken umbrella. Her real name wasn't even Zanele Adebo. It was Zanele Amuriat. He spoke to old neighbors, teachers, and even a retired headmistress who remembered Zanele as a bright girl with big dreams but no money. They all had kind things to say, but none matched the life of wealth Zanele had painted. Badu even found photos of her barefoot in school, standing proudly next to her classmates in worn-out uniforms. There was no Paris, no private schools, just hard times, struggle, and a girl who desperately wanted more. When Badu returned to Accra and placed the folder on Madame Ife's table, her heart sank. She had hoped to be wrong, but the evidence was undeniable. The woman about to marry her son had lied about everything. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. The Ofori estate had been decorated with fine linen, crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the room buzzed with powerful figures from Accra's elite. Zanele sat beside Kojo, smiling through her nerves, hoping the storm had passed. She thought maybe she had managed to bury the past again, but Madame Ife had other plans. With calm precision, she rose from her seat and tapped her wine glass gently. The room fell silent. "I have something important to share," she said, her voice steady but cold. She turned to a nearby server and nodded. The lights dimmed and a projector screen descended behind her. Everyone watched, confused, until a photo appeared. A young girl in a torn school uniform, barefoot, standing in front of a small, dusty classroom. The room gasped. Then came a video. An older woman, smiling warmly into the camera, said, "That's my daughter, Zanele. She always dreamed big, even when we had nothing." Zanele's hands began to tremble. Her heart pounded in her ears. She couldn't breathe. Madame Ife continued, showing more images. Zanele selling mangoes with her mother, sweeping a street in Mbale, her real school records. Then came the statements from neighbors and teachers, all confirming her real background. Each word, each image was like a hammer cracking through the fantasy Zanele had built. Kojo looked at Zanele in shock, pain clouding his eyes. "Is this true?" he whispered. Zanele opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with judgment, disbelief, and betrayal. Madame Ife's eyes never left her. Calm, powerful, and unshaken, she simply said, "In this family, we value truth, and lies have no place at our table." Zanele couldn't hold it in anymore. The pressure was too much. As the final photo faded from the screen and silence wrapped around the room like a cold blanket, her chest tightened. Tears welled in her eyes, and her voice cracked as she stood up, shaking. "Yes, it's true," she whispered, barely able to look at anyone. "Everything, all of it. I lied." Zanele couldn't hold it in anymore. The pressure was too much. As the final photo faded from the screen and silence wrapped around the room like a cold blanket, her chest tightened. Tears welled in her eyes, and her voice cracked as she stood up, shaking. "Yes, it's true," she whispered, barely able to look at anyone. "Everything, all of it. I lied." Gasps rippled across the table, but Zanele pressed on, her voice growing louder through the tears. "I didn't do it to hurt anyone. I was tired. Tired of being the poor girl from Mbale. Tired of pretending I was okay when I went to bed hungry. I watched my mother break her back to give me a better life, and still, no doors opened. I wanted to rewrite my story, just once, to feel like I mattered." Her hands trembled as she wiped her cheeks. When I met Kojo, I didn't mean to fall for him, but I did. And the deeper I got, the more I panicked. I thought if I told the truth, he'd walk away, that no one like him would ever want someone like me. She turned to Kojo, who sat frozen, stunned. I love you, Kojo. Not for your money, not for your name, but for the way you made me feel seen. I was just too scared you wouldn't love the real me. Her knees gave out and she sank to the floor in front of everyone, sobbing. The room was silent again, but this time the silence was different. It wasn't just shock. It was the weight of raw truth, of pain poured out in front of people who had never known real struggle. And for the first time, Zanele felt both completely broken and finally free. Kojo sat motionless, his eyes locked on Zanele, his face a storm of confusion, pain, and disbelief. The woman he had fallen in love with, the woman he had planned to marry, had just unraveled her whole truth in front of his entire family. His heart pounded. He felt like the floor had been pulled from under him. Slowly he stood up. All eyes turned to him. The tension was thick. He didn't yell. He didn't say much. Just one quiet sentence. There will be no wedding. The words hit Zanele like a blow. She gasped, but he raised his hand gently, asking her not to speak. Not yet. Then, after a pause, he said, "But I need to speak with you. Alone." The guests respectfully exited the room, leaving behind unfinished glasses of champagne and untouched plates. Kojo walked slowly to the garden, and Zanele followed, her steps unsteady. The air outside was cooler, but heavy with everything unsaid. He turned to her, his voice low. "You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. That's what hurts the most. I would have accepted the real you, Zanele. I grew up in privilege, yes, but I know fake smiles and gold-plated lies. You could have just been honest." Zanele sobbed quietly, nodding. "I was scared. I thought you'd leave. I didn't want to lose you before I had a chance." Kojo looked at her, torn. "You didn't just lie to my family. You lied to me. Still, hearing your truth tonight, I saw the real you, and she's not the villain. She's just a girl trying to survive." He sighed deeply. "But love without honesty can't stand. So I need time, Zanele. Time to heal. Time to think." Then he walked away, leaving Zanele in the silence of her shattered dream. Months passed, and Zanele's life had taken a completely different turn. The shame and betrayal she had felt that night slowly transformed into a burning desire to help others who were struggling just like she had. She had hit rock bottom, but now she was determined to rise. She started an empowerment group for girls from poor backgrounds, just like the one she had come from. Her mission was clear: to give young women the tools, confidence, and opportunities to change their lives, regardless of where they came from. Zanele worked tirelessly, organizing workshops, mentorship programs, and community events. She wasn't just talking about change, she was making it happen. Slowly, word spread. The community, once skeptical of her, began to see her as a leader, a woman who had turned her mistakes into motivation. Her story became a source of inspiration, and soon, her efforts caught the attention of bigger platforms. One day, Zanele received an invitation to speak at the UN Women's Summit in New York. It was an honor she could hardly believe. She had come so far from the scared, ashamed girl at the Offery estate. When she took the stage at the summit, the crowd was captivated by her powerful words and the sincerity that shone through every sentence. She spoke about overcoming adversity, finding purpose in pain, and lifting others as you rise. Among the audience, Kojo sat, his eyes fixed on her. He had seen her on social media, heard about her work, but hearing her speak in person, seeing her in her element, was different. She was no longer the woman who had deceived him. She was a force, a woman who had found strength in her flaws and had turned her pain into a mission that could change the world. And in that moment, he realized that Zanele's journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. If Zanele's journey inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of strength, growth, and redemption. Let's spread the message that no matter where you come from, you can rewrite your story.